Yuta Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathan Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagan Lalita Sri Vishakan Vitamscha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारिणे वाञ्छा कल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, welcome everyone. Could just someone confirm on the chat if I'm audible before I begin? If the voice is okay? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, someone has said. Okay, so before we begin our discussion on the topic today, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7. Let's connect my head. Yeah. The topic that we have for today, we'll just take a couple of minutes to pray for the departed soul of this girl Sriji, who passed away today morning, daughter of Sundar Kanai Prabhu, granddaughter of Bhadravati Mataji. Generally, when a 7-year-old girl, 8-year-old girl passes away, it's I mean, when anyone passes away, there is a lot of sadness. But when a small girl of this age she departs, then the parents, family members, everyone who knows that a particular individual, it becomes very difficult, challenging for all who have love and affection for that girl. The only good thing we could reflect back is that she got a nice association. She was staying in Golok only, literally last 7 years, surrounded by devotees, temple programs. So of course the parents also tried hard with good medical help. So besides everything, when something happens, then we just have to take it as whatever the will of the divine. So let's take maybe a short time to pray for the departed soul, so that she continues onwards in her journey towards perfection. Certainly, she would get a much better opportunity next time, because she has got a very good background of these last 7-8 years from her parents and from her family and all the devotees surrounding her. Okay, so we would continue with our theme. So last time we had, so we were doing Bhagavad Gita chapter-wise summary, and we had done till 6 chapters. So we are going to go ahead to the 7th chapter today and have a look at certain important concepts of the 7th chapter. Okay, so we have about 6 or 7 points that we need to discuss in the next 1 hour. I've just listed them down, and we would, do it serially in this particular order. Okay, so the first thing is to see the background once again. So just like there is something called as the walk of a lion. When a lion walks, it walks for some time and then again looks back and sees what he has covered or something. So that's considered the walk of a lion. So even when we are studying the scripture time and again, we will, voice is breaking. Oh my God, 1 second. Let me see if I could change my internet connection. I have 2 devices over here, so maybe I'll try the second one. Give me a second. Yeah, so I have just changed my internet connection. I had two devices, so I hope this is slightly better. Okay, I'll continue, and then maybe devotees can say whether it is okay or no. Keeping video of maybe help if bandwidth is low. Okay. Yeah, maybe I'll try that. Okay, so we'll try like this and let us see how it goes. So, as I said, the lion's walk is as it walks, it just looks back and reflects about what distance it has covered. So similarly, we have done 6 chapters. We would briefly look at something behind and then go ahead. So the first theme for our today's discussion based on the 7th chapter is about how Krishna always wants his devotees to do swadharma. Okay, so there is this is a nice thing that I heard some time back from a famous Vaishnava poet who says about Krishna's need. He says that Krishna is Bhakta Vasavrata and also Bhakta Swadharma Rakshana. Basically, that means Krishna always wants to be controlled by his devotee, and at the same time, he wants to protect his devotee's Swadharma or his devotee's efforts. He wants to protect that. So, on one hand, he wants to be controlled by his devotee, and at the same time, he wants to ensure that his devotee does the Swadharma properly. So, for that, 2-3 stories we could reflect on. One, of course, I heard during the Damodar month about the Damodar Leela. So in the Damodar Leela, it is said, finally, Krishna agreed to be bound by Mother Yashoda to satisfy both these things. One is he wanted to be controlled by Mother Yashoda because Mother Yashoda was trying to control him, chastise him, regulate him, and so on. And Krishna wanted to ensure that that happens. And at the same time, Krishna wanted to ensure that the Swadharma of Yashoda is protected. Because Yashoda's Swadharma as a mother was to discipline Krishna. So that was Yashoda's need. Okay, so Krishna's need is to be controlled by his devotee. And from Krishna's perspective, Krishna feels that his devotee's need is that their Swadharma must be protected. Okay, so in the Damodar Leela, you will see both. Krishna being controlled by his devotee, and at the same time, Krishna ensuring that Mother Yashoda's, role as a mother, that particular dharma is protected and that is not getting destroyed. Okay, so that's one example. We can see a couple more before we go ahead. Again, if you look at the Bhagavad Gita itself, right? So in the Bhagavad Gita, if you see, on one hand, Krishna, so the first thing was happening. Krishna was under the control of Arjuna, his devotee, right? Because Arjuna in the first chapter, he says, Senayor Ubayor Madhya Ratam Stapay Mechuta, take my chariot in between the two armies. And Krishna was doing that. So Krishna was very happy that, hey, my devotee is controlling me. It's something that I like. But the other thing wasn't happening, that Arjuna's Swadharma was being compromised because he wanted to run away from the battlefield for all the reasons that he offered. Hence, Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita. So again, here we see the same thing. Another example that is given in this context is of Mahaprabhu. So Mahaprabhu, in his relationship with Gadadhar Pandit, we all know the story where Gadadhar Pandit wanted to accompany Lord Chaitanya on his tours to Vrindavan. Okay, and Mahaprabhu's need was that he wanted to be controlled by his devotee. So he was allowing him, though initially externally he wasn't very happy, but he allowed him. But then after some time, Mahaprabhu also had this particular need that Gadadhar Pandit's Swadharma, which is there, which is to that Kshetra Sannyas, right? Because Gadadhar Pandit, if we all know that he had taken this particular vow of Kshetra Sannyas, that he will never leave Jagannath Puri. So that had also to be protected. Hence, finally, at one point, Mahaprabhu literally had to have a stone in his heart and say that, now Gadadhar, you have to go back. And Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami very beautifully explains that it was very difficult for the Lord to do it. So he in fact quotes just like how to protect Bhishma's vow, Krishna took the chakra and did something. Similarly, Mahaprabhu, to protect Gadadhar Pandit's vow, he did something that was very difficult for him, separation from his devotee. Okay, so this is how we can understand from the Supreme Lord's perspective that he wants to be controlled by his devotee, and at the same time he wants to ensure that his devotees Swadharma is protected. And that's what we see in the Damodar Leela, in the Bhagavad Gita, and also in Mahaprabhu's interactions with Sri Gadadhar Pandit. Okay, so that is the first point with which we start. Now the second thing is about the need of Ishvara. So if you see, I mean, in the first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita that we discussed, the prominent focus was karma, right? Karma yoga was there throughout. Third chapter was karma yoga. Second chapter was nishkama karma yoga. Third chapter was the principle of karma yoga, why even a perfected person must do, and so on. In fourth chapter, Krishna is talking about karma yoga as yajna. He's talking about the same thing actually. Now the yoga becomes a yajna, a sacrifice. And in the fifth chapter, he talks about karma yoga at such a level that one is externally engaged, but internally completely like an observer. So that is the fifth chapter, if you carefully see, right? Where Krishna is speaking of the Atma as an observer. That means he's only observing. And it's very interesting. If we think about our daily life also, from morning to night, we get up, we brush, we are doing this, that. Our body is engaged in so many activities, and literally, we are like an observer only to what is happening, right? As in, so many things are happening externally, and we are just observing our own body doing so many things. Okay, so that is what Krishna speaks in the fifth chapter, and finally in the sixth chapter he speaks on. So then at the end of fifth chapter, so because the heart is now freed, one can go become meditative and focus on the super soul. And then that's why Krishna speaks about the Dhyana Yoga in the sixth chapter. So this has been the theme in the first 6 chapters. Now from the 7th to 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, we all know that this is the bhakti section where Krishna is talking more about Ishvara. So the question is, why does one need an Ishvara? How does Ishvara come? And how does Ishvara seamlessly connect with this entire topic of Swadharma that we have been discussing in the Bhagavad Gita till now? Okay, so this is the second theme that we wish to discuss today. So I'll make 2 subpoints in that. Point number 1 is that if you see the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, I had done this course with Govardhan Eco Village. It was an online course on Patanjali Yoga Sutras. I think we did a couple of sessions here as well, but then I didn't continue that. Maybe I'll continue at some other time. But one thing that is there in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras is that he talks about self-realization without even a need for God. As in the way Patanjali describes it, there are 2 paths he describes for self-realization. One is Ishvara Pranidhana, and there is also a path that he talks of, which is called as involution, which basically means Patanjali does talk of the concept of taking any object in the world. Okay, it may be a rose, let us say, and you do something called as involution on it. Involution, it's a very detailed thing about how Patanjali describes, but in essence, it is like you see the rose, then you understand the characteristics of the rose. So the rose is red in color, or the rose is fragrant. Then you slowly come to the understanding that I am experiencing the fragrance of the rose. Then you focus more on that I am, because I am experiencing the rose, right? So involution means you come one step back. So there is the rose, they're perceiving the rose, and then you come one step back that I am perceiving, then only I am, and then finally I. So this is the path which I described in very brief here, but it's a very detailed explanation given how this involution can be done, where you start meditating with any object and slowly you come to that aham, and you come to that understanding of the self, right? So Patanjali does talk about it. Though he talks about Ishvara Pranidhana, he talks about this also. He kind of gives an option. Either you could achieve success like this or like this. And that's how he describes it. But if you see Bhagavad Gita 6th chapter of Dhyana Yoga, it goes beyond that, because Krishna talks primarily about Ishvara, that's of course himself. The reason being that without Ishvara, without the Lord, everything is, if someone thinks about success only in terms of myself, and I will achieve success, either materially or spiritually, I don't need a God. So Patanjali sometimes makes yoga seem as if one doesn't even need the Supreme Lord for success in some places. Okay, so that is something, if you see carefully, then that gratitude is not there only. It is more about, I can do it myself. I don't need anyone now. So you get that kind of a feeling with that particular path. Okay. So the gratitude, the love, the service, none of it is there. So that is where the Bhagavad Gita is very beautiful. Krishna is talking in the 6th chapter Bhagavad Gita about the same concepts that Patanjali spoke of in the Yoga Sutras, like asana, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, and all that. But the difference is that Krishna is talking about Ishvara. Correct? Because these three things which are there, our effort, prakriti, Lord's mercy, we cannot forget any one of them. So if somebody stops only till Bhagavad Gita 6th chapter and doesn't go ahead, he or she would not be able to appreciate this particular beauty of how you express gratitude to the Lord, how you connect to the Lord in love and all that, right? It just stops at that. And that's really the beauty of the Bhagavad Gita and about Krishna himself, who actually completes it in a way. He never goes either way. So Patanjali on one hand goes in this direction sometimes, that we don't need the Lord, we can do it ourselves. Or sometimes some fanatic devotee may think that I don't have to do anything, it's just the Lord's mercy, like that, as in, right? So that becomes an extreme again. Okay, but Krishna is always very happy to see devotees integrating. So there is one story in the Mahabharata which is in connection to this, where the Pandavas were in exile, and Krishna came to meet the Pandavas along with Satyaki and Balramji. When he came to meet along with Satyaki and Balramji, Satyaki, he was Arjuna's disciple and everything. So he volunteered to the Pandavas, he volunteered Yudhishthira Maharaj that you please give us an order, and immediately along with the entire army of Dwaraka, we will go and attack and finish off these people. Okay, so Balram was also with Satyaki nodding his head. So they were saying that we'll go and finish them off and directly install you as a king. What is all this 13 years exile and all? We don't want to accept all this. So at that time, Yudhishthira Maharaj tells Satyaki that thank you very much for this offer, but we shall do it ourselves. You have given this offer, Satyaki, Balram, Krishna, all of you. He's addressing all of them because Satyaki spoke on behalf of entire Dwaraka and Krishna and Balram. But Yudhishthira Maharaj said, thank you very much for the offer, but we will do it ourselves. So it is said that Krishna appreciates this point very much, because Krishna likes to see this, that his devotees are not simply hanging on him, and they are ready to strive also, correct? So both these things are there, striving oneself as well as needing the grace of Ishvara. Okay, and the beauty of Krishna, Bhagavad Gita, Mahabharata is they connect and integrate both, correct? Because of which it becomes very complete. Okay, so moving ahead, another point why about the same thing about the need of Ishvara is that if you look at karma, which was discussed in the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, it is like cleaning the house. So why does a person have to do karma yoga? If you ask, the answer is to keep the house clean, because the house is the house of the body and the mind. And when you engage in Swadharma, when you're properly engaged in so many ways, there's a lot of positivity in the entire system. Okay, so it is clean. But then what is the use of the clean house? Okay, it is to bring that positivity. It is to, connect to God. So there Ishvara comes in, to complete it. Otherwise, what happens is, if one only talks about karma, karma yoga, etc., then what can happen? Only karma, he keeps saying that I have to do duty, this, that. Then it can bring about exhaustion. Like sometimes you will see in the world that there are people who do all their duties very meticulously, but they are not kind of so well connected to God in some gratitude form. So then what happens? So either two things can happen. Either if there is success, one can become arrogant because one thinks that he's the doer and he can be arrogant. Or if there is failure, he can feel frustrated. He can feel very tired. Thak jayega aadmi. Because there is nothing beyond that, right? So person can feel tired and frustrated. So the thing is, without Ishvara, only karma doesn't really work. As in, either the gratitude principle is absent, it is not complete, or it makes you only tired, frustrated, or arrogant. So in either case, either case is basically a case of atheism only. Okay, so that is why the higher power is very important, and that is the connection to the higher power is what is there in the second set of 6 chapters. And this higher power can be connected even through prakriti, so that is why if you see carefully from the 7th, 10th chapter, so many things Krishna talks about prakriti. Actually, Krishna is talking about how he is there everywhere. Correct. And this is again an amazing beauty of Sanatana Dharma, of our scriptures, that even, for example, so just to give a simple example, if somebody goes to the bank of Ganga in Rishikesh or some Rudra Prayag or somewhere, and you sit in the presence of Ganga, and you're sitting in that place itself in presence of Mother Ganga, you're forced to in some way connect to the divine within, even if that person may not know deeply the glories of Ganga, etc. Just that environment, just being in that prakriti itself, actually makes a person very internally contemplative. Okay, that's why in our scriptures we see this whole thing about paryatan. Paryatan means, like we see in the first canto Srimad Bhagavatam, we have the story of our Narada Muni, right? So there is this Narada boy who is traveling, correct? He after his mother dies, he just goes out. And if you see, there are so many verses in the Bhagavatam that describe how Narad Muni is, as he's traveling, he's seeing mountains, rivers, and he's experiencing God, Krishna, in connection to all of that. Okay, so this is very much there in our scriptures, where you experience God in connection with Prakriti, right? In connection with Prakriti. Okay, and that is there in the prayers of our great persons also. Like this month is the month of Marga Shirsha, where the Sri Vaishnavas, they recite and deeply contemplate and meditate on the prayers of Andal. Now, if you look at her prayers, there are two things in it. At one level, it is talking about rain. It is talking about the prosperity that we need through the cows, through their milk, through the land, through the crops, and so on. And at the same time, all of that, in one sense, also has the higher dimensional meaning of the rain of devotional service within our hearts, the shower of the mercy of Krishna, and so on. So those prayers, if you see, in fact, in an external level, many of the verses of Andal are actually talking about Prakriti. They're talking about nature. They're talking about the necessity for prosperity in nature. But internally, it has that other meaning as well, about how all those things, what they are saying, Andal is talking to all her friends, is all connected to the Divyatva, to the divine. Okay, so the point here is that our scriptures have that harmony of connecting Prakriti with Krishna. Okay, so we don't see them competing with each other, right? We don't see anything competing with each other. We never saw in the first 6 chapters our Swadharma, our occupation, competing with devotional service. And now we are not going to see Prakriti as competing with devotional service. Okay, so Prakriti and everything that comes along with it, okay, we will never see that. Okay, so there is that famous story of Prabhupada traveling in a flight where there was, I think, Shrutakirti Prabhu, and there was some Carnatic music being played in the Air India flight. And Prabhupada asked Shrutakirti Prabhu, what do you feel about this music? So he thought that this is mundane, because it was only some violin or something like that. There wasn't any lyrics. So he didn't say anything. Prabhupada said, it is so nice. Okay, so so the point is, in our scriptures and Gita in general, you connect everything basically. So that is what we are going to see in the 7th chapter. And that is what I'm talking as the third theme for today, how Krishna integrates. And there is one author who speaks about 7th chapter as Jiva Jagata Ishvara Yoga. So there is Jiva, there is Jagata, and there is Ishvara. Okay, Jiva Jagata Ishvara Yoga. So there is Jiva, there is Jagata, there is Ishvara. All three. Okay, I think I've written here Jiva Ishvara, but that's a mistake. Jiva Jagata Ishvara. So there is Jiva Jagata Ishvara. We'll define these terms quickly. But Krishna is talking about integration of everything. And that's how Krishna begins the 7th chapter. If you see that first verse, Maya Sakta Manapartha Yoga Yunjan Madasraya Asamshayam samagram mam yata jnashyasi tachrunu. If you see in some ways that word samagram which is there actually refers to an integration. Okay. And in this particular chapter, Krishna is speaking about all these three things. And if you see even the words, in our Sanskrit vocabulary, they have such a precise definition. Like if you see this word jiva and you see the word atma, it looks as if it's the same thing, right? There is atma, jiva. But no, atma means the pure state of jiva. Jiva means the conditional state of atma. So in the conditional existence, we refer to the person as jiva. So that's why we have all these songs, Jiva Jago. And so many of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's songs, you will see the word jiva coming in because he's addressing the conditioned soul. But when we are addressing the atma, then that's considered the pure state, which is not conditioned. Okay, so as long as it is conditioned, it is called as jiva. Some subtle differences in definitions. So this exists. Similarly, if you see Ishwara, if you see all these words also like avatar, avatar is a human aspect, right? We have discussed this when we discussed earlier about 4th chapter. Avatar has a human limitation because he's coming to this world and he's sometimes bound by human limitation. He does some great magic once in a while, but not always. Right? We see how Abhimanyu is dead, but Krishna is not doing anything. And later, when Parikshit thing happens, Krishna comes in. So that's how Avatar. Once in a while, he will do something. But generally, he is acting limited by human limitations. Bhagavan, on the other hand, has no limitation on it. So there is a difference between Avatar and Bhagavan. Bhagavan means he has no limitation. He is not bound by time, by many things. And Ishvara, on the other hand, means one who is controlling the jivas and the jagat. So when we say Ishvara, like in the 7th chapter, we are talking about that aspect of the Lord who has some kind of control as in he's like a niyantra, right? He is directing the wanderings of all living entities and so on and so forth, right? So he does that. Okay, so each of these things are there. So the beauty of the Bhagavad Gita, the beauty of the 7th chapter, and the beauty of this entire scripture is how Krishna is integrating everything so well, and literally is making the entire battlefield come alive. Correct? So Krishna is viewing the whole battlefield as Yajna Kunda. There is no difference between material, spiritual, and so on in Arjuna's actions, because Krishna sees that very, very integrated, and that's how he's presenting it. And that is the beauty of Bhagavad Gita or any other scripture. However, now we will come to what I feel is one of the main themes which we had for discussion today, which is based on one verse of this particular 7th chapter, where Krishna says Shabda ke Paurusham Rishu. Correct? So that word comes in the Bhagavad Gita 7th chapter, Paurusham. Paurusham, one author has also talks about it as Kartritva. Kartritva means, right, you understand Kartritva, which means that it's in fact that word itself is pretty self-explanatory. The jiva's desire and nature to be very active and doing something in the world, that's called as Kartritva. Okay, so this word tva means it is there in it. So I know nowadays in our, due to one of our political leaders who is making a huge distinction between Hindu and Hindutva, there is a lot of charcha going on in all the news channels and social media places, etc. But if you see in one way, it's a meaningless point, because if you see tva, like if you see Purusha and Purushatva, Purusha means man, Purushatva means what? That particular ability, that manliness, correct? So without manliness, what do you mean a man? So somebody says that he is a Purusha, but he doesn't have Purushatva. Then from Sanskrit and vocabulary perspective, it makes no sense only. Like, Stri means Stritva. Right? You need to have that manliness, that feminineness. If you are a female without those feminine qualities, then what is the meaning of being a female? So similarly, if you are a Hindu without those qualities which are associated with it, right? So it's actually such a foolish debate that's going on. And unfortunately, it's going on because nobody understands the Sanskrit also, the tva, right? That tva suffix which is there, which means it is there in it. Okay, so without understanding that, people are just talking something which absolutely makes no sense, right? So kartritva, this word again, it's a very interesting word. It indicates that the jiva has this particular core character of wanting to do something, right? He has that nature, his own ability is there, and he wants to do that. So talking about that, talking about this kartrutva, this Purusha, which Krishna is referring as in the 7th chapter, there is so there is this whole thought in psychology, in psychology, that in psychology there is this thought that for a person to have a very integrated existence of body, mind, and intelligence, if he is acting as per his nature, see, if somebody is acting in the body at the bodily level as per their nature and the requirements of the mind, then it says that the difference between the body and the mind is reduced, correct? The duality is reduced. So it is said that the person is also mentally very happy. On the other hand, if there is too much gap between what the body is physically doing and what that person's psychological nature needs, if there is a gap in that and the duality is too much, as we have discussed, one goal of life is to reduce the duality and not increase it. So when that gap becomes too much, it is said even to affect and create a lot of mental diseases in one's body. So one lands up in a lot of mental diseases when there is too much gap. Okay, like for example, even it is said even too much of dreaming at night, especially getting different disturbing kind of dreams, etc., is said to be because of the gap between the mind and body. That means between what the body is doing and what the mind is experiencing or needing. Okay, so in so many ways, if you see, unless this kartrutva, the person engages very well as per his need that is there, that gap will always be there and it would be creating so many problems. Okay, so if you see, kartrutva can also be defined as active hopefulness. Active hopefulness, that means the person is very active at the same time, because he is connected in the 7th chapter as we are seeing to Eastward, he is very hopeful as well. Okay, so in this way, so even about Maya, so Maya is something that is defined in this particular chapter, right? Like we all know that famous verse in 7th chapter, Devi Hesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Dhuratteya Mame Vaye Prapadyante Maya Metam Tarantite. So Maya is defined. So Maya, we have heard so many classes and we have had so much discussion about Maya, but have a look at this definition of Maya. Maya, of course, this we have heard many times. Maya is seeing what is not and not seeing what should be seen. Okay, so this is like a general definition of Maya, we all know. Maya means to see what is not there and to not see what is there. Okay, so this is called as Maya. Now, if you apply this definition of Maya to kartrutva, which we are discussing here, or the Swadharma principle, then to not see the limitations, let us say for a parent, to not see the limitations of their child and dream about something which that child cannot do is Maya. Like for example, if somebody is thinking that my child should become a cricket player like Virat Kohli or my MS Dhoni or something, then you're not seeing perhaps the limitations of your child. You're thinking, you're projecting something on him which is not there. So that is Maya, because you're seeing what is not there, right? You're seeing a Dhoni or a Tendulkar in your child when that is not there. So that again becomes Maya. And at the same time, to not see what is there. Okay, so suppose a child does have certain capacity, a person has a particular capacity, and we don't see it and we don't encourage that, that also is considered Maya only in this definition, correct? Because you're not, right? So both aspects are there in Maya. And in this way, Maya is not just, so of course, we all know this one, the standard understanding of Maya that we have, which is of course there, which is the attractiveness of this material world, right? Which pulls us into its attractiveness and we get bewildered and so on. So that is there. But this definition is also there, that Maya means to not see limitations when there are limitations, and to limit something which is actually limitless. Okay, so that also becomes Maya, right? So in this way, if you see the way Krishna presents Gita, and if you understand it like that, so it harmonizes both our limitations and our potential, because both have to be harmonized, right? So only when both have to be harmonized, then one increases its capacity. Okay, so if you see, Krishna and Lord Rama also is very, very impressed by that kartritva, that Purusha. So let's go to Rama and one simple story to understand this kartritva concept better. So when Hanumanji first comes in front of Ram and Lakshman, it is said that Hanumanji speaks so nicely. There is this whole description in Kishkinda Kand, how Hanumanji speaks, correct? And Lord Ram is very much impressed by his speech, his qualities, and he appreciates Hanuman's good qualities, his speech, his effort in presenting something, right? So sometimes we think that someone is a very good presenter, that's all. No, but that is also very important, and that is actually appreciated by Lord Ram when Hanumanji comes there, correct? So this whole thing about speaking well, presenting well, all that also comes under this kartrutvam only, paurusham. It is an ability where the jiva is endeavoring, he is working on his capacity and he is doing something nicely. And the Lord is always impressed by that. Now, why Hanuman? Lord Ram was impressed by Ravan also when he saw him first time, saying that, oh, what a great person he is. Correct. So I mean, can you imagine someone's wife is kidnapped and he gave him 10 months of sleepless nights? But Ram, when he looks at Ravan, he's very impressed because that personality, that charisma, right, that ability of Ravan is attractive to Lord Ram. He is appreciating it. He's saying that only if he was not other, only if he would return me my Sita, that's all. Then I would have nothing to do with him. I wouldn't really have to unnecessarily fight with him. He's a great man. Right. So Ram had that maturity and that amazing outlook of able to appreciate anybody. What to speak of Hanuman? He was a great devotee, but he was someone like Ravan, because they all had that paurusham, that ability in man. Okay. And similarly, when we see that. So now we come to this second, the correct fifth part of what we are talking, Vibhuti. Because now from the 7th chapter onwards till the 10th chapter, Krishna is explaining Vibhuti Yoga also simultaneously, right? In the 7th chapter, it starts little bit. There are 3-4 verses beginning with Rasoham Apsu Kaunteya, Prapasmi Sashi Suryayoho, Punyo Gandha Prativyam Cha, Bijam Mam Sarva Bhutanam, right? So there are at least Balam Balavatam Chaham, all those verses, if you carefully see, Krishna is talking in the 7th chapter Bhagavad Gita about Vibhuti Yoga. He's starting it here, but he's taking it to another level only in the 10th chapter. So the whole, this whole idea of Vibhuti Yoga purpose is also to give us a remembrance of Krishna. Because please remember, Arjuna wanted to see Krishna everywhere and everything in Krishna, correct? So for that purpose, Krishna begins this whole discussion. Because Vibhuti is not avatar, but it gives a jhalak of avatar. Okay, so if one sees Himalayas, like I'm sure like all of us have gone to Badrinath or one of these places, and you stand in front of the Himalayas and see the magnificent mountain range, it actually mesmerizes us. If you sit on the banks of the Ganga, the flowing Ganga, you're just completely mesmerized. You're experiencing that Vibhuti of the Lord. In fact, if you see in one place, Prabhupada writes, Hitler's power is also Vibhuti. Okay, some people misunderstood that statement. But that is also correct, because it is not necessary that this Vibhuti is always dharmic. So even these adharmic, whatever exhibitions of power and grandeur that are there, they are also reminding us of Krishna. Okay, so it is just like we say, right? Darkness comes from light only. Darkness comes from light. Darkness has no independent existence. Agyan is related to Gyan. Correct. So similarly, even the negative forces, when they display that grandeur, that also is considered a Vibhuti only. So whether it is Tendulkar's cricketing skills or that Messi and Ronaldo, the way they hit a goal, right, which people see, admire, if they could at that time just relate to Krishna, saying that, yes, this is God's Vibhuti, God is so amazing that just a small spark is there in this person and he's able to, kick the ball in this particular way, that becomes the beginning of their Krishna consciousness. Like Prabhupada told famously that hippie, that as you're drinking beer, you think that the taste of the beer is Krishna. So that is also coming from the 7th chapter. Krishna is the taste of water. So pure water, Krishna is the taste, but these are contaminated water. But even in that, whatever juice a person is getting, it is coming from him. It may be adharmic, but adharma is also coming from him only. It is a backside of the Lord, adharma. Correct? So this is how, in the 7th chapter, Krishna is beautifully beginning to describe how one can see him in prakriti, how one can see him literally everywhere. And that's why if you see, when in our scripture, when in Bhagavatam, when Hiranyakashipu is asking Prahlad, where is your God? Prahlad is saying, my Lord is everywhere. There is no question of he not being there, right? Because that's how the Gita, the Bhagavat presents the Supreme Lord. Someone who is not just all pervading, he's present everywhere. He's present everywhere, need not necessarily be seen as, of course, he's present as a Paramatma in every atom, but even as the Vibhuti, even as Prakriti, he's there everywhere. And this is the great beauty of our scriptures, where we are able to connect everything to him. Our Swadharma, the Prakriti, he himself, and so on. Correct. And the final topic which I would just take and we would conclude our discussion is about how Krishna also speaks in this particular chapter about Dvandva Mohena Bharata, Ichcha Dvesha Samuttena Dvandva Mohena Bharata, going beyond dualities, Ichcha and Dvesha. Okay, Ichcha is desire, Dvesha is hatred. So if you see in so many ways, we have discussed this many times, that duality, Dvandva, is an important theme in the Gita, which Krishna presents in many places. 2nd chapter he presents in many places. In the 7th chapter, again, he's talking about it. Dvandva Mohena Bharata. Okay, because the process of yoga is harmonizing that. The body and the soul, the potential, the limitation, whether you call it self-growth and helping society, compassion and having strength. Correct. That's why that famous saint is there in Maharashtra, Samartha Ramdas. Samartha means capable, right? Very confident, someone who is endeavoring hard. And Ramdas is servant of Ram. If somebody is only Samartha, then he becomes like Hitler. And somebody is only Ramdas, is like Gandhi. You know, Gandhi was saying Ram Ram, but there was no Samarthya. There was really nothing tangible being accomplished despite whatever he said and so on. Correct. So in this way, Krishna harmonizes between all these by, so essentially one thing I wanted to once again reiterate before we end today's discussion, just summarize everything and reiterate on the important point that I wanted to say. We started talking about how Krishna's need is simultaneously to be controlled by his devotee and also to protect his devotee's dharma. Okay, we saw that in Damodar Leela, where he wanted to be controlled by Mother Yashoda. At the same time, he wanted Yashoda to do her duty as a mother. Same thing in Bhagavad Gita. He was being controlled by Arjuna, and at the same time, Krishna wanted Arjuna to be situated in Swadharma. We also saw the example of Gadadhar Pandit, where Mahaprabhu fulfilled his desires, at the same time wanted Gadadhar Pandit's Swadharma of Kshetra Sannyas to be protected. Hence, he sent him back. Then we saw about the need for Ishvara. We saw how Patanjali Yoga describes yoga also in a way where you don't need God actively. Okay, he talks about this process of involution, where you could take anything, you could meditate on any object like a rose, and you could come to Aham Brahmasmi level. So since he talks about it, the Vedic path, it is there. Okay, so that path is there. He talks about Ishvara Pranidhana as optional. Surrender to Krishna as optional, he talks about. That's why Vaishnavas don't like that so much, because for us, that love aspect is very important. Because by hearing yoga as a path where you can achieve success yourself, it can make you a little bit disconnected with the Lord, and you miss out on all the love, the relationship, everything, which we are not very happy about. But the beauty of Gita, we said, is that it integrates everything. Krishna talks about the principles of Patanjali Yoga Sutra, about the eightfold path, but at the same time, he brings in Ishvara, right? Yoginam api sarvesham madgate nantaratmana. Then we also saw that though in the first 5 chapters, Krishna is talking so much about karma, without Ishvara, karma can either go to your head or it can make you very frustrated and morose. So we need Ishvara to complete that whole thing. Okay, then we saw how 7th chapter is an integration of Jiva, Jagat and Ishvara. Right? And all these concepts are being spoken in the 7th chapter. Jiva, we said, is the conditional nature of the Atma. Atma is the liberated state of Jiva. Then Jagat. We saw how in our scriptures, in our prayers, unlike the Abrahamic religions, the Jagat and Ishvara are connected. We see Ishvara in Jagat and the whole Jagat in Ishvara as well. We see both ways, right? And I was describing how in Andal's prayers also, we see the same thing. We see that everywhere, right? Then we also saw about this Purushatva, Kartritva, Paurusham. We cannot separate it. Unlike foolish people who are trying to separate Hindu and Hindutva as if they are two different entities. I saw a nice cartoon somewhere that showed Vishwamitra doing yajna as Hinduism and Ram and Lakshman shooting arrows at Marich and Subahu as Hindutva. So it was basically made obviously by some right-wing people. It indicated very nicely that you can't separate these two things and only a fool will separate. Like you can't separate Purusha and Purushatva, a man and that manliness, that essence of a man. So similarly, Kartritva, Purusha, from the Jiva, you cannot separate it. He is active. And in fact, we said that if he doesn't act as per his nature and there is too much gap between his mind and his body, he also can end up with psychological diseases. That's why those people are healthy in life, even physically healthy, mentally healthy, those who are contributing nicely. Many times you see this, that someone is a very active person in the world. As long as he's working in the world in a nice position, he is actually healthy also. Suddenly one day he retires, I say, bimar ho jata hai wo, because he's not contributing according to his nature. That gap is something that is unable to handle. There are many people like that. And that's why we sometimes see also these politicians and all that. They are even maybe a little elderly in age, but they can work a lot because there is a lot of harmony in one sense. Their nature and their body, it is completely in harmony. Their nature is to be a politician and their body is just running 16 hours a day. They are working, whatever, whether a chief minister, prime minister, any party, in fact. These people work very hard and they don't get fatigued also. As long as they are in power, they are not even sick. One day these people don't take leave and all because there is a lot of harmony in the two. Correct. So similarly, we saw that how Kartritva is very important. And we saw that whole thing from Krishna's perspective, right? We spoke about that story of Mahabharata, where Yudhishthir tells Satyaki Balram, we will manage ourselves. And Krishna is very happy to hear that. Krishna doesn't feel, Arey, ye mere devotee hai, mujhe puchna chahiye, I will fight and give the kingdom. Krishna is happy to see that there is Paurusham, there is Kartritva in the Pandavas. Similarly, we saw how Lord Ram was very happy to see the Kartritva of Hanumanji, how he's presenting so nicely, how he's speaking. Right, we will sometimes see those verses from the Valmiki Ramayana. Beautiful verses. Lord Ram speaks about Hanuman's Kartritva and even Ravana's, in fact, on that hand. So we saw that as well. And we saw also one interesting definition of Maya, which is basically to not see what is there and to see what is not there. So this is at one level for illusion. And I also said that it applies to seeing a limitation when there is no limitation and not seeing a limitation when there is a limitation. So that is also Maya, right? And then we saw how about Vibhuti Yoga, how Krishna is speaking of these Vibhutis now onwards, and how we can see God literally everywhere. And we saw that how even in evil forces, what they are representing, that grandeur, that splendor, is a reflection of Krishna's greatness only, though in a negative way, like darkness comes from light, like that kind of a thing. Then how Krishna ends this chapter by talking about Dvandva Mohena Bharata, how you escape Dvandva, Ichha, Dvesha, by these two, by connecting to the Supreme in this particular yoga, where you connect all these three, Jiva, Jagat, and Ishvara. You connect them all together. Okay, so that's about it. So any questions or comments? Anyone would like to raise their hand or something? Let me just see if someone is raising the hand. One second. Okay. Okay, so I have enabled Satyakama Prabhu first. Would you like to talk? I have enabled whoever hand is up, I'm enabling one by one. So Satyakama Prabhu, you want to unmute? Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Actually, by mistake, it was I raised hand.
Sorry no problem. No problem. Yeah. Haribol. I don't know whether the second is also. I'll enable him. Yeah.
Hare. Yes, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. This is Balram Nityadas. Prabhuji, we were talking about connecting everything to Ishvara. right? So
Yeah.
but it may happen that we may have some desire which is not what to say, which we think that yeah we can connect to Ishvara, or we may leverage that philosophy to say that yeah I am connecting to Ishvara, but actually it may not be the case. So how do we avoid that risk, like even in connecting to Ishvara, what can be the guidelines?
Okay. Well, see, I'm just trying to think where that would happen. Generally, as long as none of our actions or none of our endeavors are in any way violating the principles of dharma, we don't go away from Ishvara. Okay, so if something is grossly violating the principle of dharma, then only it goes away from Ishvara. Okay, so that's why we have to. If you remember last time, I think I made this point, and we were talking about it, that there is a difference between disposition and habit. Okay, so disposition is not habit. So habits can be bad habit, which can take you away from Ishvara. Okay, so like I was saying that aggressive, kind of being a little aggressive personality is a disposition, but being violent and beating up is a bad habit. Okay, so that will take us away from Ishvara. But aggression in general will not. So just like, for example, if somebody is slow, that doesn't mean that he is somebody is soft spoken. It doesn't actually mean that he's humble. Sometimes we mix it up. Like some devotee is very soft spoken, we think that he's very humble by nature. No, that's a soft spoken nature. That is his disposition. That is good. Okay, but that humility is something different altogether, right? So these qualities which are there are disposition, and habits are generally what takes us away from Ishvara are the lower nature, which if you see from Gita perspective is very clear. It is kama, krodha, and lobha. Krishna says these three are the gates to hell. So if somebody is going in that direction, then only there is that danger of going away from Ishvara. Kama, krodha, tata, lobhas. Krishna is talking about these three as gateway to hell. Krishna talks about that in the 3rd chapter. He talks about that in the 16th chapter. Okay, so these are the lower habits, the lower nature of the jiva which comes up, which needs to be kept subdued. But other than that, Krishna doesn't talk of a particular endeavor as bad. As in, for example, if somebody is trying to be a big businessman, now again, see, there is this thing about greed, and also there is this thing about nature. So let's try to distinguish the two. Let's say someone wants to make money because it's his disposition. So then it becomes a need. Are you understanding? See, someone is there, he's a very talented person. He wishes to do something and earn more resources. And then with those resources, he could do dharma, he could do so many things with it. Of course, he will also have a comfortable life. That part is there. Okay, but as long as it is not being done with, so we will have to distinguish between these two things: disposition, why you are doing it, the disposition part, and the falling prey to the what we call as the vices, the anartha kind of thing. So as long as that discrimination is there and we are clear about it, I wouldn't see that as a problem. Is that okay?
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you. Got it.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. Anybody else with any other question or comment? Is that okay? So we can end the class. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So there's one question, I think. I don't know. I think that is, yeah. Trimang Mohan Prabhu. Yeah, please go ahead.
Prabhu, can you just little bit elaborate on the point where you said that the PM or some personalities, they work even if they are like old, but still with a vigor, they are able to work. So on what basis they do that?
Yeah, yeah. So basically, I was telling you, I'll tell you in what context I was saying this. I was saying in the context that, I mean, let's see the other way also. There are many people, it is reported actually. It is actually reported by psychology, by health, etc. That when people are engaged well, physically and mentally, they are healthy also. And on the other hand, like this happens, especially it is said to many retired people. Because a person is very active in the world, he's doing work and this and that. Suddenly he retires and he has nothing to do. So when that happens, they collapse also. As in, because there is now nothing to do, right? So their mind and their body, there becomes too much gap. Imagine someone is working very hard till 62, and not only bodily is working, mentally also is working. Suddenly, एक दिन वो रुक जाता है, कुछ नहीं करता. He's just sitting at home and reading newspaper. That becomes too much for the person to take. Correct. So generally it is said for retired people also, they should be engaged in something. They should find something where they have some activity to do. Correct. Of course, from devotee perspective, we have a lot of activity. Like our devotees who get retired, they come to some book distribution stall, they're sitting in temples, giving charnamrit or doing deity worship, managing accounts. We see that now with many retired devotees in our community also. So with devotee people it is there, but even otherwise, everybody, whether it's devotee, not devotee, whatever, because why that is important? Because the jiva's nature is kartritva. See, just because he's 60 years, he cannot stop functioning, na. Uska nature hai na, contribute karna. He wants to do something. So formally, he cannot work in a government office or something, but then he will have to keep doing something. Otherwise, it is observed actually that many people who suddenly stop like that or who have nothing to do, they start getting all kinds of diseases. So I was saying the other way also, that many of these people, like these politicians and all, like India Prime Minister, I mean, recently in Varanasi, they inaugurated that Kashi temple, so beautiful corridor. And if you see Modi ji and Yogi ji at night, 1 o'clock, they were walking on that Varanasi railway station. Correct. And next day morning, immediately. So these people, they just sleep for 4 or 5 hours like that. 3-4 hours actually. I mean, literally they work 17, 18, 20 hours a day. More than that, perhaps. I had heard from one of my relatives, who is in government service, that when Modi ji, when he travels abroad, it seems he always travels in such a way that at night he will be taking rest in the plane only. So that he 2 reasons, so that he doesn't have to rent a hotel wherever he goes in whichever country. And second thing, when he lands like at 8 o'clock, then immediately work will start. And then they will adjust the flight in the way the next destination, they will travel in the night in the flight. So whatever sleeping, getting ready, everything happens in the flight and you are back in action. So we see this, many of these people, even the others, I mean, all kinds of people who occupy these political posts sometimes, they actually work very hard. They work extremely hard. And we see that by and large, they're healthy also. Correct? You don't see them, getting some 10 years, 15 years, they continue as chief minister, prime minister and all, and they're doing very well in life in terms of their health. It doesn't seem that they're getting affected. Ordinary, so why is that happening? Because that's what we were seeing from Gita perspective, that Purusham which is there, that ability in man. Krishna is saying, I am the ability in man. That ability, everybody has intrinsically, and if one engages that according to the nature, see, I was telling that, when we don't engage ourselves according to the nature, we bring many diseases to our mind and body. On the other hand, if we engage according to our nature, we can be healthy and happy in this world also. Correct? So both things are there. That is why I give that example. Is that okay?
Yes, bro. Thank you.
Yeah. Haribol.
Haribol.
Yeah. So, yeah, Nitin Prabhu, yeah. Go ahead.
Krishna Prabhuji, thank you for the wonderful class. Am I audible?
Yeah, very well, very well.
Yes, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, just I wanted to ask you some paradox in the thing. Just you are giving the example of politicians and the persons who are holding the key positions, that they are working very hard, sleeping very less, like 4 or 5 hours, and working very hard. So it is against the science. Either it is Ayurveda or it is modern science. They are telling that 6 hours sleep is needed, etc. But still they are working and doing very nice. Another part of the science is that, for example, this COVID wave come. Actually, recently the question arises from the point that when I was attending a seminar, medical seminar recently, they were telling that the time progressing, our age limit of the average age is increasing because the medical facilities are increasing. So as per the scriptures, Kali Yuga, the age has to decline, but it is increasing because our medical facilities are increasing. And similarly, as we see in the first wave, many doctors died because health workers died because there was no vaccine. But in the second wave, although it is much more fatal than the first wave, but doctors and health workers survived because they were mostly vaccinated at the second wave. Sometimes we see the paradox in science and scriptures, and sometimes they are going the line. So how to understand all these things?
Yeah, good. See, first of all, that's why, see, when you say everybody needs adequate rest, this, that, it all depends person to person. See, this even when we say 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours, you can't make a blanket rule like that. You can't make a blanket rule of eating. Bhima and Arjun both will eat 5 chapatis. No, Bhima needs 10 chapatis. Arjun is happy with 4 chapatis. So basically, so similarly sleep also. Like Arjuna never slept at all most of the time, it is said. Correct? It is said that Arjuna would practice archery at night. He would hardly sleep. He had conquered sleep also. He has one name also, I think Gudakesh or something, no? Where he had conquered sleep literally. So that doesn't mean he didn't sleep at all. What it basically means is he slept very less. And you see that with people like Prabhupada was sleeping only 3 hours a day and translating. Or this Prime Minister kind of people. So basically what happens now? See, that's what again, if you see Prabhupada ji also, he was engaged in something which was his heart, right? He wanted to do that preaching on behalf of Saraswati Thakur, and he was engaged in that. Can you imagine? The body, the mind, the soul, everything is in sync with it. So much energy comes in a person's body by that. And that's also one reason, if you see carefully, how these people who are completely in sync, body, mind, and soul, they can contribute a lot, and they need sleep. Not that they don't need sleep at all, but literally less. Like Prabhupada said that I never slept at all. So this can happen. So this doesn't contradict anything we learned. It just means that for everyone that requirement is that scale is different depending on who they are and what they are doing and so on. That's the first thing. Second thing, see, we should always remember, we cannot go too overboard with any statement. For example, we cannot simply say that medical science is totally useless or modern things are only our Ayurveda, Vedas. So it's not like that. So certainly, if the human endeavor, they have produced a vaccine or whatever, it would have some properties, right? It would have some saving grace. And that you see that. So Pratyaksha Praman cannot be neglected. So certainly we accept Shabda Praman, and Shabda Praman is always correct, but even Pratyaksha Praman has its basis. So if by Pratyaksha Praman you see that people are taking vaccine, people are taking medicine and they can live decent lives, we'll have to accept it. Okay. Now, as far as the scriptural statements about life reducing in Kali Yuga, see, you will have to see that in a larger perspective. Like if you see in the Mahabharata, all these people were fighting the war at the age of 90. Yudhishthir Maharaj was 90-year-old when he was fighting the war. He lived 36 years after that. Today, no 90-year-old man can fight a battle, right? I mean, if you take a comparison over a very long period of time, the ability is certainly less. And in many ways, the ability is less also. That is also that you can't dispute that, Prabhuji. Despite whatever we say, medical help. See, medical help sometimes also prolongs the life of a sick person for a long time. But in terms of ability, sometimes we see that like our old grandmother at home, she had much ability to cook and to do things at home than maybe a new generation lady. She doesn't have the stamina to do. Maybe she will live 2-3 years longer, but that stamina, that vigor, that life sometimes is not there also because of lifestyle or whatever you want to make it. So my point is, we can never go overboard in any case, correct? So we will have to look at Pratyaksha, Anumana, Shabda, everything. Is that okay? Yeah.
And just one small point that we say the age of the person is the fixed. So how it is fixed like that? It is fixed or it can be prolonged slightly, or only the breaths are fixed?
Only the
breath हम कितना सांस लेते हैं वो fixed है या years are fixed? We say na that the age of the person is fixed, how much he will live, whether it is fixed or it is just for the sake of saying only.
Yeah, no, see, this fixed also, see, that's why we have Akala Mrityu. Once if you remember, we discussed this. Akala Mrityu means accidental death, like person commits suicide, right, or person does something. So you can invite misery also on yourself. So similarly, you could, see, action can never be minimized. Let's not take any extreme that something is fixed to such an extent that you can't do anything about it. And also the thing that action is not at all important. No, I mean, how you live matters, right? So you cannot take that extreme that it is fixed. So you can't take it in that way. So we will have to always harmonize between both. That's something that we have always said. Yeah, Hare Bol.
Thank you.
I think we will end now. I have some other class or thing to do. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Nitya Gaur Premanand.